Hello, comrades, Dankey Kang gang. It's Comrade Dankey here again with my shitty fucking video format. Uh, my low quality, tanky garbage that I am just filling breadtube up with, and everybody hates it. Even though I'm allowed to. It's in the rules, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, nothing says I'm not allowed to post my low quality, tanky videos on breadtube. I should be allowed to do that. It's my constitutional right, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, anyway, you say, I think we can both agree capitalism is not left wing. Yes. If you say no to this question, I want you to delete your YouTube channel. Well, you don't have to worry about me deleting my YouTube channel because I think YouTube's going to pretty much handle that already on their own. But in terms of me thinking capitalism's left wing, yeah, no, that's a no for me, dog. Capitalism's on the right. We're in agreement there, friend. I think we are the same, you and I. We're not so different, you and I. Anyway, it says state capitalism means primarily the state owns and controls the means of production, and that the state subjugates workers through controlling their time and labor just as a capitalist would, and can, but not always, because productive enslaved labor can still be done under a state capitalism where non-enslaved workers are paid, subject them to wage labor, and can, but not always, it's as a consequence of not having worldwide socialism, do commodity production for sale to other countries' markets. So the two primary criterion for state capitalism is state control over the labor of workers and state control over the operation and placement of the means of production via ownership. I know of no Leninist society in which these criteria weren't fulfilled. Therefore, all Leninist societies, as far as I'm aware, have been state capitalist, at least in the majority of the economy. There are obviously a minority of cooperatives in Cuba, the market capitalist industry and cooperatives in China now, and co-ops under Mao, etc. But state capitalism is the predominant relations to the means of production. Before we move on, let's break this down. State capitalism. If you're really interested in learning about this, a guy I can reference you to is not this one, not this one, not this one, not this one. This guy, the Finnish Bolshevik. He will answer your questions, friends. He is a learned man. He is a knowledged man. He is a wise master of theory, and he's my senpai. He noticed me, and I'm sure he'll notice you too if you ask him a question. And if you're really earnest in learning about this, I mean, he answers the question right here, friend. I'll send you the link to this video if you want me to. I'm not sure you want me to, but if you request it, I'll send it to you, friend. But this guy, he's great. He provides the transcripts. This was something I found of interest to you. Lenin says here, he says, socialism is merely the next step forward from state capitalist monopoly. No revolt can bring about socialism unless the economic conditions for socialism are ripe. State monopoly capitalism is a complete material preparation for socialism, the threshold of socialism, a rung on the ladder of history between which and the rung called socialism, there are no intermediate rungs. So that was from Lenin's The Impending Catastrophe and How to Combat It in 1917. So, in other words, Lenin was using a state capitalist system primarily because they didn't have a nationalized agricultural sector yet. The agricultural sector was still largely privatized. So, but in order to lay the groundwork for socialism in the future, Lenin used state capitalism in the new economic policy. So he says the new economic policy was a transition policy from capitalism to socialism. During the NEP, the proletariat had conquered state power, and large industry was mostly nationalized into the hands of the state. However, it wasn't socialism yet, particularly because the agricultural sector was still mostly in private hands, hence why Lenin called it state capitalism. It would have been inaccurate to call it state socialism. It was the preparation for socialism. So I will read you this, and then we'll move on from there. But I'll read you this. Lenin said, infinitely stereotyped, for instance, is the argument they learned by rote during the development of West European social democracy, namely that we are not yet ripe for socialism. But a certain learned gentleman among them put it, the objective economic premises for socialism do not exist in our country. To quote, the development of the productive forces of Russia has not yet attained the level that makes socialism possible, end quote. All of the heroes of the Second International, including, of course, Sukharnov, beat the drums about this proposition. They keep harping on this incontrovertible proposition in 1,000 different keys and think that it's a decisive criterion of our revolution. You say that civilization is necessary for the building of socialism? Very good. But could we not first create such prerequisites of civilization in our country by the expulsion of the landowners and the Russian capitalists, and then start moving towards socialism? Where, in what books have you read that such variations of the customary historical sequence of events are impermissible or impossible? So, in other words, he said, under no circumstances can the party of the proletariat set itself the aim for introducing socialism in a country of small peasants so long as the overwhelming majority of the population has not come to realize the need for a socialist revolution. He says, but only bourgeois sophists hiding behind neo-Marxist catchwords can deduce from this truth a justification of the policy of postponing immediate revolutionary measures, the time for which is fully ripe. Measures for which have been frequently resorted to during the war by a number of bourgeois states, nationalization of land, of all banks and capitalist syndicates, or at least the immediate establishment of the control of Soviets of workers' deputies, etc. over them, which are only steps towards socialism and which are perfectly feasible economically. So, in other words, Lenin viewed the state capitalist phase of the new economic policy as being merely a rung on the ladder towards socialism. It was to build up the industrial sector to a point where they could get socialism. So, and keep in mind that the government of the USSR was a government of the proletariat, so state power rested in the hands of the proletariat. It didn't rest in the hands of the bourgeoisie. So you can't really compare the state capitalism of, say, the USSR and the NEP to the state capitalism of, like, the Weimar Republic in Germany, because in Germany you still had the bourgeoisie in charge of state power. In the USSR, the proletariat were in charge of state power. So, you can't really say that it wasn't real socialism because they were state capitalist, because, my friend, even if they were state capitalist, the state was a state of the proletariat. So, all that in mind, this guy says, recall that a state was previously defined as a state, in the anarchist conception, a small body of professional decision makers with a monopoly on the legitimized use of violence or the issuance of orders to such violence over a given territory that their decisions govern. Okay, so yeah, I understand that. I understand this. So a state capitalist country is a country in which the state has primary control over almost all sectors of the economy. They command the economy, in other words. But the key difference between the USSR and, say, other state capitalist countries, and when I say the USSR, I mean specifically the USSR during the NEP, is that the USSR was a proletarian state, whereas other state capitalist countries like Weimar Germany were bourgeois states. So you say, by the way, don't call people you don't know with the pronoun / gender of dudes or gendered pronouns generally, like you did in that video. Not only does it pose a problem to non-binary comrades for what should be very obvious reasons, it's also a patriarchal notion to assume that everyone in any given space, especially spaces of people you think are worth talking to, since the implication would be that most women aren't, is a guy, and that women are aberrations from the male norm is also factually untrue. Alright, so alright, friend, you're kind of miscategorizing my this is just my manner of speech, comrade. I call everybody dude. It's a common thing, especially when I don't know if you're a man or a woman. I don't want to have to say dude and dudettes, because dudettes saying dudettes is lame. But I'd be more than happy to call you by your preferred pronoun. I don't have a crystal ball, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not able to reach across the gap of the internet and see what somebody looks like, so I'd be able and know magically what they want to be called. So I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry if I generalize to dudes. I've called girls dude a lot. Girls have called me dude. I've called them dude. It's a dude eat dude world out there, and I think dude is a fairly gender neutral term, if you ask me. If I called you bro or something like that, well then yeah, maybe. But you also have to consider the intent for which I say it. Knowing that you are a trans person, I'm not gonna go out of my way to misgender you or antagonize you in that manner. So yeah, I mean, from now on, I'll refer to you by whatever you want. You're owed that courtesy. I'm sorry I called you dude, if you're not a dude. But yeah, once again, it says, for the record, I'm a woman, just a very sweary anarchist woman that doesn't want her comrades shot on the altar of this nonsense left unity idea, when the history books tell a very different story about what Leninists think of playing nicely. Spain, Russia, China, Vietnam, Cuba, etc., etc. Name a Leninist state or movement, and at least a couple anarchists have been famously murdered there or exiled from there. Okay. I think I said this before, but I'm not like a historian. I don't know everything about Spain and Russia and China and Vietnam and Cuba. I live in the US, so you have to forgive me if I'm not aware of every single going on of those countries. That being said, I'm sure that there were executions of anarchists, executions of obstructionists, reactionaries, counter-revolutionaries, etc., etc. Whether or not those executions or imprisonments were justified, well, that's up to interpretation. That's up to the evidence. That's up to the trial. So I don't know what you're trying to really say here with this final paragraph. Are you trying to say that left unity shouldn't be a goal of us? We shouldn't strive to get everybody on the same page? Because I think that's kind of not constructive at all. If it is, we need everybody to come to a consensus about the best way to go forward with this. The only way we're going to do that is if we talk with each other honestly. And part of talking to each other honestly is getting over our Western bias about these communist countries that we've been told are just these evil, dictatorial, authoritarian shitholes. You know, maybe actually try looking at what life is like in Cuba, and you know, might see that it's not that bad. Certainly not as bad as it was during the Batista regime. So all that said, hit me up in the comments. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I hope this helps people. I hope more people see this. I'm interested in talking. I'm interested in the discussion. As long as people are talking to me in good faith, it's all good on this end. So thank you all. Well-being for all. In the words of Kropotkin. That's what I want for everybody. That's what Marxist-Leninists want for everybody too. Unless you're a fucking capitalist chud, unless you're some kind of fascist capitalist chud scum. In that case, I don't give a shit about your well-being. But otherwise, yes, well-being for all. Oh no, how do I turn off OBS? It's such a shitty way of making videos, ladies and gentlemen.